London. This is Mariam Sharif, and welcome to the Star Moguls Podcast. Back after a break, but with a lovely guest. I'm joined by Anita Grey, and she is a sustainable fashion designer and expert. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you so much, Mariam. It's my pleasure to be here.
So I'm really interested in sustainability for the last few years, and being in fashion and style, I feel that we in the fashion industry should be taking more responsibility for sustainability, for protecting the environment. But for somebody who has no knowledge about sustainability or what a sustainable fashion designer is, can you explain what you do?
Yes, of course. So there are 3P when it comes to the concept of sustainability: people, profit, and planet. And if you want to address it that way, then your business design, apart from just being beautiful, a beautiful dress, it needs to respect labor that's involved into the production, at the same time cause no harm to nature. And in order to be able to repeat the same cycle, it's actually more of a cycle economy eventually, but yeah, you need to get some profit on the top of that so you can like provide more people with work and care about the environment while doing that.
What interested you, and where did you study fashion?
It was not something that I've chosen. I've
How
been
did you come across it, and what instigated this feeling of for you to do something like this?
I started when I was 12, and I started because my parents thought that one skirt to school for the school year was enough, and I didn't agree with that. So I just, instead of being upset, I started making my own garments. And of course, I had like nothing to do, like no materials, no fabric, no resources, and being angry at my mom, I just started repurposing her wardrobe. But I'm glad that she never punished me for that. Yes, she always encouraged my creative juices.
We didn't take any of her very expensive clothing.
Yeah, and it started that way. Nobody ever took me seriously in my family. When I joined the course for pattern making, I was 12, and the course, the age of an average student was around 18. So nobody took me seriously. They didn't want me to enroll to the course. I had to beg for 1 year, and I was 13. I finished 2 years of professional pattern making. When everybody went out to play around, I just like every day, even during summer holidays.
You were 13 when you started pattern making, pattern cutting, or pattern design.
Yeah, designing, modeling, yes. And back then I didn't need a degree, but the world requires you to have some. Yeah. Especially in like post-Soviet world, I think you need to have a piece of paper to prove that you exist.
Yes.
In different areas. So yeah, I had to have mine. And my parents were afraid of me just being another artist, and like living in frugal and poverty. So they asked me to take a language course. That's what you do as a girl, right? Like you become an interpreter and stuff like that. So yeah, I pleased my parents. On the top of that, I became a fashion designer. That was my second degree. Third degree was critical design from London University, Goldsmith College. Fourth degree was about sustainability and resource saving at light industry. And now I'm studying master's online in one of the US universities.
What is the influence of your parents? What kind of background do your parents have? Do they come from any creative industries? Did they understand what you wanted to do?
I would say less of creative, more of a craft making.
Okay.
And I think that was also influenced due to their lifestyle they had to leave. Like in 1930s, my family was displaced and sent to Siberia with nothing. And
right.
I remember the stories of my grandparents like living in this underground digged houses to survive the first winter in Siberia. And there is never
where were you born, Anita, so we can have some context about your background?
I was born in Kazakhstan. That's where my grandfather brought the whole family after the Second World War. He decided like they've never had tomatoes, and once he saw one, he wanted his family to have like more fruits and nuts in his life. So that was the first movement of my family.
Oh, and it all started from a tomato.
It is. Yeah. I remember my grandmother said when she first time in Siberia saw a tomato somebody brought over, a relative, she refused because she said, I don't want to have a taste of something I would never have again.
Oh.
And yeah.
Oh, that's
And
a
that was just like what two generations back.
wow. Wow. Okay. So then you moved to where then? Where was your childhood?
I was born and raised in Kazakhstan, in ex-capital Almaty,
Right.
and I think I was quite lucky. On the one hand, it was the place, as we know from the historical perspective, where a lot of people were sent into those who were not supposed to participate either in the Second World War. Like in my class, we had among 35 people, like representatives of nearly 14 different nationalities. And
Mm.
this friendship and this like equality you're brought up with, like accepting everybody was quite important for me. And when we moved to Russia, I was 14, and we moved to our historical land from which we were um, sent to Siberia, and that was my first time in Russia. And yeah, I think I have more of
So
an Asian
being
mentality.
so wanting to study fashion or style or this craft, what were the resources available to you at that time? I mean,
To,
compared
to
to the
be
West,
honest, next to nothing. It's like when we moved to Russia, I remember we had like no more than a backpack each, because there were like some nationalistic movements back then, and my parents were looking forward to like a bright future for me and my brother, and they believed Russian education would be. I think it's also money influence. Like they couldn't afford to move abroad; they didn't speak any other language than Russian, and that's why I think I wasn't even upset with my parents for never supporting my wish to become a fashion designer. So it's like that's why I never mentioned to people that I make my own garments, because I was ashamed. Like back then, it wasn't about being sustainable and being aware. And then on the top of that, I can't afford to buy a piece of fabric. And I remember my dream, like long-lasting dream, was just to buy a piece of fabric and to cut one dress without like mixing together textures and colors. Because yeah, so I've been repurposing. And back then, I think there were some trends. It was called like green design or eco design. It wasn't popular. I think it was mainly for weeders, and it was one of them.
there's so much to be done for sustainability regarding the fashion industry. And I think it's the second biggest polluter in the world. So we have a big responsibility. What are we doing to combat that? And how can we take that sustainability movement forward?
I think there is a positive trend when it comes to fashion weeks. I remember when I first time attended mine, I was 16. A classmate's mother was organizing one with actually Vivienne Westwood attending it.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yes, I didn't know who was Vivienne
Oh,
Westwood
you
when I was 16. I'm sorry for making one.
wonderful. Oh, wow. You had the privilege. Wow.
And then it's just because she saw something in me, and like my first photo shoot was conducted also by her husband. They just believed in me. I think that's how my first portfolio was created. I've never been
Wow.
selected
So you've been
for the.
endorsed by Vivienne Westwood's. Can we just take that back? So your first fashion show, or yeah?
No. I wasn't. It's like interesting because there were like a number of shows I was invited, but I struggled to even pass the selection round because I've never had like one piece of textile or to match the whole collection. It was like
Right.
I had a topic, like I would make it out of denim, and I would collect all my friends' denim and then like repurpose it and stuff like that. So they were not sure that what they see they could call fashion. I think like fashion back then, like beginning 90s, beginning of 2000, it was quite like you need to fit into certain pattern,
Yeah.
and like the more stylish you are, the more black you are. And yeah, so Vivienne Westwood was somewhere there, but she didn't see my collection. I wish she did. Maybe my life would have been different. And now, for example, for designers like myself, I mean, like Moscow Fashion Week, New York Fashion Week, London Fashion Week, they provide scholarships, they provide grants. And I think that's a huge difference, at least for the visibility of those designers, because we
Yes.
know like any young designer struggles to launch the business and the company, and especially it feels like you're being punished for being sustainable, because on the one hand everything is more expensive if you're ethical, right? The labor and materials, because they are like naturally outsourced or naturally dyed, and it's like a
Yes.
long process. On the other hand, so you're not famous yet, but you're very expensive. And at least when back in Russia, people prefer like brands that they recognize for others to be recognized, because it would show your social status.
Yes.
Yeah, I think like there is this gap between like what designers could offer and who would buy them. Like the percentage of those who are sustainable as a client and could afford a handmade item. Like, for example, I had a collection of garments showcasing in a museum. Like, that's my way to slow down fashion. I take fashion to gallery spaces, and like it takes up to 1 month to create a coat, like, and it's made out of trash. Who would want to invest £2,000 to pay for that, right? So it's quite expensive, and you're not still famous, and you either need to be crazy about it, and that's how I usually start my introductions. I was like, I'm sustainable freak, because normal people wouldn't agree to do that. I think it's more of an art, but I'm positive. I think if we would have more brands, more supports, more scholarships, then there is a chance. There is this international award that's carried out in Hong Kong with educational program for free for designers from all over the world. There was first Sustainable Fashion Week last year in Bristol ever. There is like this first sustainable fashion competition that was carried out in St. Petersburg recently. So like it's, on the one hand, you need to provide people with some platforms, right, to showcase their design, like opportunities, and it's happening. It's very slow. I think we consume faster than then we educate ourselves about sustainability. But I believe in people. I'm quite a positive person, and I believe that as scientists suggest, I'm not a scientist. I don't claim that's the truth, but still, it's like if we have still like 10-15 years left before we can change something in this world, right, for the next generations, it's like now or never. I would still try my best, and if I fail 15 years later, I would open a bottle of and champagne of like, to toast towards my failure. But until that day, I would do as much as possible.
So I believe it's an education. We need to change the mindset. Even myself, I wear things intentionally. I've started to really observe what I wear. I've really never been a lover of fast fashion. And even if I have the fast fashion pieces, I still have more than 10 years back. I really look after my clothes and take care of them like they're my own friends in my wardrobe. So I think that's what it needs to be done, that we respect and look after our clothes just as much.
I think it's important that you've mentioned it. I believe that we need to have these rituals about how we treat special pieces. Fashion Revolution in London had this project about loved garments, and you write down a story about the garment you love. And then I actually published, and they had a review on the book. I've asked 100 people to share their loved items, and it's interesting, like most of the times it wouldn't be something, outrageously expensive. It's something like a friend of mine said her brother went to army and he gave her this hoodie, and when she was wearing the hoodie, she felt like the brother was hugging her while she was like alone, missing him, and a lot of things like that. So actually the value of the garment, it's not itself in the brand. It could be in the brand, and it may be with the big fashion houses, it could be that way, because it's still like recognition of your social status. But at the same time, it's like when you bought it, who you went out with. Was it like the day you shopped with your mom? Was it the last time you saw your grandmother when she presented you with a scarf and things like that? So it's also
it's more of a sentimental value, isn't it, rather than having something
exactly
monetary value.
That was the story. Like 100 people I've asked, and there's only one person who said Jimmy Choo. But I think I knew that would be the answer from that particular person.
Okay.
But apart from that, I agree that it's education, and I think that's why I've even tried to change the direction. It's like doing sustainable fashion, more of an art thing, but at the same time, like being engaged with educating young generation.
So there is a change in the way that we are consuming, and I think it's just the way that our world has changed. Do you not agree? We were going to have this interview earlier on in the year, and then it got delayed. And from where we were and from where the world is now is completely different. How are you coping as not just as a sustainable designer, but someone who is of Russian origin, and how are you perceived in the world now?
I'm currently based in Georgia, and that's a very beautiful and welcoming country, but it's my personal thing. But since the special operation started, uh, I just didn't leave the house. I only move using cabs. And it's not that there is this fear, but I can see how upset people are here, for example. But then another thing that upsets me, when you work on sustainability and you would like to change the life of those people in developing countries who actually produce our garments and have no voice. And as a member of Fashion Revolution movement, one day the British team stopped talking to us. And it was a little bit upsetting, because it's like, you've been working on helping others for years and there is nothing you did. And
So just no contact whatsoever?
Yeah, they just politely stopped answering. And I mean, I haven't been like living in Russia for the last 12 years. I used to drop by for a month or a week to visit my mom every other year. And I mean, ethnically, I'm Tatar. I was born in Kazakhstan. The passport says I'm Russian. And I would say, yeah, that's a beautiful country. And I have a lot of beautiful friends, of course. And my connections with the country would be still there. But you kind of like being punished by the world for the place you are associated with and for the place you are born. And that's the things we can't choose. And the same with, sustainable fashion. It's interesting because all through my career experience, I wanted to see it, like what's actually happening at the production site. And I worked in like Morocco, Turkey, China, India, and I've seen the mistreatment of people who were producing for brands, for European brands, like we were producing for different, like French, Italian, German. And whenever they would come to visit, of course, everybody would like clean, even have the shoes on that day. But when these like business partners or the clients would be gone back to Europe, like the conditions people are working at are terrible. And afterwards, I also worked in countries like UK, Italy, and USA as a designer. And then when I studied in London, and you can see like in the academia world, there is this discourse about sustainable fashion, but those people who engage in the discourse, they've never been to the production side themselves. And it's, for me, it was a little bit interesting, how could they solve the issue of those like poor and unfortunate people, while like, you sit in the, I don't know, I love London.
What do you love about London and London's fashion? What do you love about this part of the world?
I love freedom. I think that was the first time when I realized that as a human I have rights, and as a female I have rights. And that quite influenced my relationship with my brother when he came back, because I came back after London. I was around 35, 34, and I didn't cook anymore. And since 18, I was cooking for the whole family. That was expected from a family, a girl from a Muslim family, at least in my family. And my mom was quite upset with me, and she was like, how dare you not to cook for your brother? And I was like, he's not my husband, neither my child, and I don't feel the responsibility. I'm happy to cook and invite him over. So my brother thought that I was spoiled. But I think I was experiencing the freedom I've never realized I actually have. The same when it came to fashion, I realized I could experience and be dressed as stylish as I wanted. Once my brother visited, and he was like, you're a fashion designer, look at you, you look terrible. And I was like, I'm breaking the norm. How do you want me to re-emerge as a fashion designer, knowing who I am, if I would just follow the trends? And so I believe that would never happen in Russia.
Do you also think, I'm just going to ask you this. So you knowing yourself as a person, is this where you kind of really had that freedom to understand who you were, and so you could project that into your designs?
Yes, you're right. It's actually, as a child, I had this fear of doing any research, because I was afraid that I might be impacted by somebody's design and just, subconsciously steal it.
Yes,
Whenever
yes.
I was suggested, and I think that's why I also like never followed any big brands or designers, and I didn't know what they were doing. And
Yes.
it was once at the university when I created a new piece of item, and I brought it to my school university teacher, and I was so proud of myself. She showed me like in 1960 there was a designer who created the same skirt, and she said like you need to start looking into the references.
Yeah.
And yes, so I believe
Because we, obviously, referencing fashion, but your concept was completely unique to you, but it was already something that had been.
Yeah, somebody has already existed. So I was like making the bicycle from scratch, right? And nobody needed this new bicycle. But I believe that London, maybe actually the educational program as well, maybe like the freedom of choice, what you can do. They also taught me to input my personal story into what I do. I remember once my tutor told me like, if it bothers you, it would bother another like 100,000 people. So there's always audience there. And if you would be the voice for them, it would like resonate with them. So, and then access to all the workshops, amazing stuff at the Goldsmith University design department workshops. I mean, we could do everything, and I did everything like metalwork, woodwork, 3D printing, paint on silk. And I think like my mind was exploding and I wanted to experiment, and maybe I knew it was like, one of chance. It's like you have only 1 year and you have all of these workshops, and I spent at school from 10 to 11. Once I received a message from my friend and he said, I'm so sorry for you. You're in London and you never hang out and you constantly stay in the university library. But
that's why I want.
Pissed. I was like, you don't get it. I'm not here because I'm pushed. I'm not here because of the deadline. I'm here because I experiment.
Has the war with Ukraine and Russia, how's the impact of that?
Prior to that, I started working on a post-apocalypse collection. And I just thought I want to create 33 item, like stylish enough for everybody to have. People don't need more than that. There's a concept, right, that we don't need more than 33 item. And I thought like maybe that would be my sustainable response to the world. It's like you want to buy this sweater, 30 years later it would be still in my shop. First one wears out, you like the design, you come and it's still there. And I was like thinking of designs when if you are injured, how could the doctors get access, to your blood veins without like undressing.
Okay. So if in a case of an injury, how would somebody access
to it as for a girl, but without like putting up the skirt publicly, without like this embarrassment when you're unconscious. So I was like developing this collection, and that were supposed to be 33 items. I found an amazing filmmaker here. She's Ukrainian. Her mom is still in Kiev, and we couldn't do anything. And since then I'm blocked. It's like, how could I talk about fashion when people are dying, and how could I talk about fashion film festival in London with her when her mom is still there? And so I can tell you, I don't know why, I just lost it all. And in a way, it's like this interest in post-apocalypse has always been there. And I think maybe because of the history of my family of always like losing and running away with one backpack, like at least you have enough stuff to live on. So I find it difficult. I find it difficult to work or to be creative. It's quite interesting, as I mentioned to you, since the operation started, like Western organizations stopped continuing their relationships with us, with the Russian team. But then I was also not welcome to the project that was carried out in Russia for the Russian students. Because I have connections with the UK, because I'm a member of biodegradable movement, and because I'm a member of Women in Wearable Technologies in London. So something that in the past would give me extra credits, and they would invite me on the board of experts, because it's like, if you achieve something abroad, means you were something.
Right.
But now I like found myself in this void where it's like, it's bad to be Russian, to be contacted by European organizations, and it's bad to be associated with European organizations to be an expert in Russia.
So when one door, I always think this way. So one door closes, another opens. have you found another door?
Creative way. It's not that I can't think. Maybe I just don't allow myself. I feel guilty for that. I feel guilty for thinking about art or fashion while there are people dying on a daily basis. Fashion for some people is something shallow, right? I don't believe in it because I believe there are a lot of social aspects that could be introduced through proper fashion, that we can impact lives of certain people in like production areas through fashion as well. And like every time I tackle a project, for me, it's not about making more garments, because I don't want to generate more trash. That's actually part of my artistic manifesto that I made myself back in like 2020. What year are we in? Oh my God.
We're in 2022. I was at the dentist yesterday. I didn't even know what was going. I was like, what year? I was like, this year has just flown by. Where is it gone? Like, it's just, what I remember of this year is just the war, and that's it. And our energy price is going up, but that's about it. Like, what else is the year? I have.
So yeah, you see, if it's like, it's about survival right now, right? Like energy prices go up, food is more expensive, and it's I'm not worried about people not buying my garments. It's like it's never been a thing for me, because I'm very bad when it comes to sailing, to be honest. Like I'm more of a creative person, and that's why I always partner with somebody who actually have more of a financial mindset. But I believe it's about I did a few projects actually to help displaced people since everything started. And I was
this is interesting. So this is what I'm saying. This one door closes and one door opens. So now you've started this project, or you're helping?
Yeah, but I would never be associated with that. And I helped 1,000 people to find accommodation when fleeing their country, in Europe and in Georgia, like worldwide. And yeah, but now I realize maybe I could use the same project and actually help all other displaced people in the world. So I never wanted it to be associated with like particular group of refugees, because I don't know, maybe it's because of my background, maybe because of like this Kazakhstan that influenced me, and I had a German and Jewish and Kazakh, Russian, Uyghur, Tatar person in my school class. And for me, we're all humans. And I never segregate people based on religion, race, or color. So I did it because I felt like I have to do something, because I couldn't do anything to prevent it. So at least I wanted to help people. And yeah, it was quite tough, because the first 5 days I hardly slept since everything started. And I think on the 5th day, we had like 2,000 people online on the application on daily basis. And then I was spending a lot of time looking for people in need of accommodation, looking for people like actually physically putting them together, linking them together. And there was still so much anger, and nobody knew what I'm doing. Nobody knew who I am, right? You can be anybody on Telegram. And I think after 2 weeks, I decided I just can't deal with that. I want to help, but there's like so much anger there. And I led the project on its own. And yeah, so a few months later, I was told that we achieved 1,000 people that we helped, at least something. So yeah, and you're right. Nowadays, for example, I'm like luckily invited to teach Oxford and Cambridge students who came to Georgia to learn Russian as a second language. And I use Russian as a media to introduce sustainability, to introduce fashion, to introduce ethics. And I really like the conversations I'm having with these British students. And it's interesting because
So what kind of conversations are you having with the British students then?
I would tell you that we have every Friday a lecture with a specialist in certain industry or field. And it happened to be that a few of the lectures on Friday were dedicated to like post-Soviet times, their political memories that's been erased from the history of certain countries. And there was people who are studying their subjects like for 10, 15 years from different countries. They're all foreigners. And so my whole week should have been dedicated to that lecture. So my students would learn the vocabulary, and by Friday they are willing to participate in a discussion. So there was one on human rights, and we were studying human rights, and we were studying like displaced people in Russia in 1930s.
Yeah.
And then we watched just one episode of a series, which is quite nice in a way. It's painful, out of 8. And they came to class and they said, could we please not watch it anymore? It's so depressing. We can't believe people live that way. And
It's reality, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's reality, isn't it?
It is reality, and it's still maybe reality for somebody, and that happened to my family, maybe because they know that happened, what they watched in the movie. Maybe they felt bad for me and they can't do anything. And but there was like, they decided themselves to dedicate the week to family domestic abuse in Russia and Uzbekistan for a certain reason. And by the end of the week, we made actually 2 projects. And I'm so grateful and pleased that they did those projects. So one project was about sterilization in Uzbekistan. So after having the second child, you are sterilized against your will. That's the government program. And
can you explain that?
Sterilization. So you're sterilized as a woman not to have any more kids after you have the second child.
Oh, after this, so you can only have 2 children?
Yes, that's the government. The government tackles the issue of kids' mortality that way. They think if you have only 2, you will take care of them better. I don't know what their reasoning behind. And my students spend their personal time to investigate if there are any documentation or legislation in United Nations, and they couldn't find any. So we created a project where Uzbeki people or women who might find our Instagram account approach us with their own story if they want anonymously, and we would retweet it and tag United Nations, because the amount of females who are suffering not only from sterilization but domestic abuse is very big. And you can't imagine how it was so moving to see how these young beautiful girls from all universities, like from the UK, age 20, I think maybe being a woman, you just try to, you know, like feel how I would feel. On the one hand, I'm happy I'm allowed to have this conversation with them. On the other hand, as you asked me about creativity, I started having like actoring classes with language learning. Or I was trying to do like some, you know, it's like field trips. So I'm giving them all possible sources and vocabulary in order to be able to speak up. And whatever they're sharing with me, it's beautiful. Then there was when your queen passed away, we had a week on monarchy, and we then afterwards created our own perfect government. And it's so beautiful. Like they came with different sorts of governmental structures, and you can see like some of them put so much thought into it, and they never thought, yes, and they were like, oh, I've been thinking about it for years. And you look at this girl, she's like 19. She's been thinking for years about the perfect government. I was like, I just love them.
That's amazing. I think until you challenge a student, you know, they don't even know their own potential. So that's a great teacher, and you're doing some great teaching, that means. Yeah. Is there do you have a favorite sustainable designer or house or product?
Because of fashion revolution and having the access to the index, like I know that Stella McCartney is doing her best, and yeah, so she is like the most sustainable among all the designers and the houses who are actually filling on the application about their transparency. It was 9 years ago when I stopped buying any garments, 5 years ago when I stopped buying any fabric, and 2 years ago when I stopped buying any shoes. So honestly, when I needed a pair of shoes recently, I was thinking about Stella McCartney.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't lie saying that not only because of her sustainability, but because of the brand recognition. Because I want people to recognize that it's her and it's sustainable. Because otherwise, if you buy any other small brand and they have beautiful designers in Georgia, then it's like they have handmade shoes here. I mean, you know, in under the ground for 40 lari, it's like 15 euro pounds.
Wow.
And it's leather, and it's handmade. And he was like, and but I'm not sure if it's ethical, because it's like they really sell them so cheap. And so yeah. So I would say that Stella McCartney would be. But when we talk about creativity and art, yeah, I love McQueen, and maybe like that's expected. I love Zaha Hadid. And I'm just so inspired by this female for being like the first female architect, and because that's one of my degrees that I haven't finished.
Who would you like your designs to be worn by? Like, do you have someone ideal in mind?
That's a good one. What's the name of the girl from Harry Potter? Emily.
Yes. Oh gosh. Let me Google it.
Emily Watson.
Emily. Oh God. Emily something. Oh gosh.
And I might even mispronounce.
Yeah. Let's check. Actress. Emma Watson. Emma Watson.
She's been traveling with the performance of the new movie, and she deliberately was wearing either secondhand items or wearing the same ones in different cities. And being such a big star, such a rich and successful woman, and not be afraid of saying that out loud, it's like, she won my heart, and there is a lot of respect for her. I think she was always also attending the green carpet events, wearing something like. So maybe there is people who would care about it, not those people who would just use it because it's trendy.
Yes, yeah. But do you not think that we should make it a trend? Not just a trend, but it's a lifestyle.
Yes, I agree with you. And I believe like from the history of costume, trends were like accepted from higher to lower levels of society. I mean, we can disagree if there are still subdivision in society, but I think it's like if we'll just judge based on the financial income, right? So like I think people always tend to look at how more famous and rich people wear, what they wear and how they dressed, especially when it comes to teenagers. So of course you would like to work with somebody who has huge influence on teenagers, so they would get right ideas from the early age until their like frontal lobe is developed. That happens.
But don't you think that many of the young people are much more aware of what's happening with the planet, and they are aware of climate change? They're more conscious, they're more aware than maybe I would say our generation. But I see many that are social environmental activists. Are they doing it really from an understanding? But even that is a starting point, isn't it?
I think it's a positive trend. You're right, even if they don't understand, but they just follow because that's something that's being discussed, right, in their circle. I think that people our age would, everybody I know would never go to secondhand shop. And
is it a cultural thing? Is it something that is a cultural or a status thing? I mean, I'm South Asian community. I speak behalf of them. I would say that I don't think anybody would have gone on. I know anyone who buys secondhand.
Yeah, the same.
Not in their mindset. It's not even in their even thinking. Why would they even want to do that? And maybe because as immigrants coming over to the UK and having this ability to now work and live in a country like the UK and being established and achieved, why would they want to? Again, it's like maybe the psychology is to, why are we going back? Why do we have to do that? How can we change that?
Point. When I was like quite active in Russia a few years ago regarding sustainability and like giving for free workshops and lectures, a lot of people who attended my workshops, like in Russia, there is no need a real demand for people to learn how to make their garments. Like they still remember Soviet poverty during Soviet times.
Exactly.
For them, it's like to go back there. And when I was giving these lectures, a lot of people like my mom's age would approach me and they say, I've never owned enough dresses and I would buy as many as my daughter wants without thinking twice. And that's why Russia was kind of like, was supposed, I'm not sure now, statistic, if we'll get the access to statistics, but it was supposed to become the third country after China and the US regarding the amount of waste generated, because the middle class became richer. They can afford more stuff that they couldn't afford before. And now until like they're still hungry. They don't buy, and they would buy new stuff because they want it. It's like I think maybe in Europe, you've already passed that period when you had enough, or you don't care anymore, or everybody could afford the same things. In Russia, it's still like a race red. So once you make it, and it's actually the garments, it's like you can see people dressed impeccably, and you would assume that they're like quite rich, but then the living conditions wouldn't reflect that. I've met a few people like that. And then every time I come to London, to Russia, it's interesting. I was visiting my mom, and instead of going like from the main entrance, I just decided to go through the parking lot. And the guy who was guarding the parking lot, he addressed me in such a mean way. It's like I was wearing jeans with holes. I was wearing a handmade coat, which when I was in Germany, everybody wanted to buy of me. And I was wearing like a recognized brand backpack. And he said, "You don't look like you could afford to live here." I was furious inside. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And my mom said, "Yeah, you know, your brother, when he goes out, he looks so nice and beautiful and dressed up. And it feels like you don't try your best." And I was like, "What are you talking about? It's nobody's business how I'm dressed." And maybe that's the struggle of mine. But it's also Tatarstan, because Tatarstan is a Muslim republic, and they always were known for like having more furs, more gold. I don't know why. Like it's quite a different place when we're talking about Russia. Like Tatar people, you can even recognize them when you go to Moscow. Like you can spot them. And so it was interesting. Like I was quite upset. Of course, I went upstairs. I put on heels. I put on dress. I put on lipsticks, and I came downstairs. And I was like, "Now I want to see your boss, because I actually live here." But I couldn't do that without all these attributes. I needed the lipstick, the dress, and the high heels. There's typical Russian way. And as you asked me earlier about London, like I know that in London nobody would judge me based on how I'm dressed. However, on a few occasions I was getting compliments when I was going to listen to my friend's performance. He's an opera singer, and like as any Russian, I would be wearing a long dress, like a gown, evening gown, or heels and stuff, and fur. And people were telling me on the street, males mainly, saying like, "Oh, you look very nice." And that's when I realized, so people notice. It just they don't want to offend you by saying that you look not nice sometimes. And I'd rather people only tell you nice things. So that's my biggest struggle, maybe.
We have to fit into that standard, that beauty standard.
I think it's also maybe, as we discussed earlier, like my father was the fifth child in a poor family. And now he owns like a few candy making factories. He made it in life. And if he take me out, his friends would think that he can't afford to buy his daughter a pair of shoes, which is ridiculous. Of course he could. He wanted, and I mentioned Stella McCartney.
Has he bought you some Stella McCartney?
No. I still wear my pair of shoes. But you know what? I'm quite loyal to everything I have. And until those shoes would work for me, until their shoes would be wearable, I can't throw them away. They've been with me like 18, maybe 50 countries. It's like, how can I treat?
That's what I'm saying. They become your friends. How's your heritage influenced your fashion of being Muslim and Russian, and you're such kind of diverse? Do you think you've taken anything from your heritage and implemented it into your designs?
You know what? Not until recently.
Really?
I think I had so much sadness as a child and such a strict upbringing, and maybe when we relocated to Russia, that's where I get my freedom, because we didn't have any relatives around, and my stepfather was like half Russian, half Chechenian. He was strict, but in the Russian scene, I was allowed to be a normal teenager. So I think it's like when I told my grandmother at 26 that that's my path, and she kicked me out of the house. She's never seen me because I wasn't maybe living up to her expectations. And that's that part. But I couldn't lie, because everybody else I know in my family would lie to her, and she wanted me to. But I respect you so much. I respect your love and believe in your God so much that I can't just tell you that I do everything according to the book. That's sad. And then she died, and I've never seen her. It was like 6 years, 7 years ago. But maybe because of that, I've never wanted anything Tatar. And I was like, oh no, for me that was like equals to villagers. It's like lack of education, or I don't know. But now with years, I was like, I wonder, because we have such a deep library of patterns, like decoration styles.
Yes,
And
yeah.
then I
It's,
started
it's your
investigating.
identity though, right?
Yes, and it's interesting. It's like I was erasing it, not
Yeah.
because any, I don't know, like Russian friend told me that it's bad, but because of my own family. I just didn't want to be associated so badly. So I was blocking it. And then I just realized it's like I started researching the costume design and the history of the patterns making, and I found this historian, and she said like in Indian in a dance, right? They tell you the story with the fingers.
Yes, yes.
In Turkic world, apparently with the patterns, they were decoding the texts, some information that needs to be translated for the next generations. There was history there. There was like, it's kind of like, what house would have what decorations would mean, like who is where socially.
Oh.
And she said, unfortunately, because Russia is so big and there are so many mixes of natures and nationalities and cultures, like it's very difficult to trace back. And she said, like, there is no person, a singular person who would do that. She wanted me to do a PhD with her, but I was still young. I was like 26. So like, no, I'm not studying anymore. I'm tired. However, I'm still back to the university now at 37, and I enjoy it.
That's a very interesting piece that you're wearing of jewelry. Is it a heritage piece?
I made it myself, but the bits at the very end, they're heritage piece. So like there were, I don't know, like maybe a few centuries back, usually girls were preparing and making jewelry for themselves before getting married.
Oh,
And depending on the epoch, it's either silver or like some other metals. This is like not silver at all, but I found it on a flea market here in Tbilisi because Georgia is Christian, and if they had any heritage of Muslim origin, it has no historical importance for them. So they just sell it very cheap. And this lady, she gave me away a few broken pieces for free because she like, I just take it, nobody wants them. I would never sell them. I couldn't believe. So I made this one. And yeah, usually it would be part of the bells that you would put in your hair. And as a young female before getting married, like it first of all showed that you're not married and young. Second of all, it's like they believe that with the sound of these hair pieces, you push their evil or genes away from you. It's like you clean the space.
okay.
Yeah, I started wearing those pieces on daily basis. Like I might be having like a European style suit and heels and have like traditional.
I love contrast. I love the combination of two contrasts. That's amazing.
In the past, I would never do that, but it's like since a few years, like 3-4 years, I started thinking I want to develop a collection on Tatar fashion, but I want it to be, it's maybe more something like that nowadays person would wear.
Where would you like to see yourself in 5 years' time?
I believe that like sustainability is not enough anymore. It should be circular economy. And I believe as a designer, I'm responsible for what I produce. And I believe every customer is responsible for what they purchase. It's the same like with the cats, dogs, or even children. I'm sorry to compare, but I believe everything that we possess should have certain value. And if it doesn't have any value, then don't buy it.
So how can we put a value on trash and recycled and sustainability then? How can we change that mindset for future buyers?
I've been once approached by a PhD student from California, and back then I think it was 5 years ago. She only found 37 sustainable designers, but who were like in luxury sustainability. And she found me for her PhD. And back then I had like no knowledge about what's your target audience, right? Like what's the market, how to enter it. And she told me that there is this wearable art move in New York. But you need to be in New York, and as a Russian to go to New York or to start selling in New York, there are like, so I hope that there would be more, I don't know, places, online shops, or maybe like brick and mortar places where people know And back then I had this great idea of mine, I believe, but yeah, it still needs a lot of investment, like to, to maybe map all of these small sustainable places and maybe to educate people to consume less.
Yes,
Like,
I think
I
it's
believe it's not about fashion, it's about consumption.
Thank you so much, Anita, for such an amazing, insightful interview. I have learned so much myself, and understanding this world that we live in. Um, thank you so much. I'm so happy to have had even a delayed interview, but it's been I think an education. So thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I hope that it was a useful conversation for your listeners.
I'll add all of Anita's details below if you have any questions or if you want to ask anything else, and the details of her website. Thank you so much, Anita. I wish you well for your journey, and I look forward to seeing some future projects and seeing you in London.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. Take care, my lovely. Take care.